Lagos Public Relations Officer Olumuyiwa Adejobi says the police is concerned about the nature of the nationwide protest in the country. Mr. Adejobi says the police force will ensure that there is no breakdown of law and order during the demonstrations, as officers have been placed on red alert.
Concerned about the dimension this protest is taking, because if we notice what happened yesterday, just barely 2 hours into the protest, we have recorded many ugly incidences across the country, and particularly in most of the major cities, where we're having cases of looting, attacks on police officers and other security agencies. The IGP has made it clear yesterday in his live broadcast that we are on a red alert. All our officers and security agencies across the country have been put on red alert to make sure we don't report any ugly incidents anywhere in Nigeria again.
Well, we covered day 2 of the nationwide protest here in Lagos, and we also witnessed the interaction between police personnel and protesters at the Ojota area of the state.
Yesterday, there was no breakdown of law and order, and we want to assure you now that there will be no breakdown of law and order. Whoa! We're here to give you security. We're here to protect you and to ensure that there is no infiltration, that hoodlums does not infiltrate your ranks to cause chaos here. We have seen responsible Nigerians here, and we know that you are here working in line with the Constitution, working in line with the law, and we'll give you protection. Be rest assured that we will not hurt you.
Senior Correspondent Ayeku just got back from Ojota. She's right here with me in the studio. Sarah, yesterday we saw the senior police officers, wearing their red bands.
Yeah.
And we saw them on the field again. Talk to us about how it played out today, because they said they are on red alert. Did you see the reddish nature of policing?
Well, we saw that they were really ready to, of course, ensure that to ensure the protection of these protesters. As at 8 a.m., although the protest didn't start on time, we're expecting that to start about 7 a.m. So at about 7 a.m., not a lot of persons were at the Ganifa Park, which is one of the designated points, for the protesters. So we'll give it up to about 8:40. Then we saw some number of protesters gather, give themselves some kind of briefing, and then, of course, talk to the police officers, because the police officers wanted them to go into the Ganifa Park. Now, the danger of the Ganifa Park, just as the protesters have said, is that they have just one exit point. So if they go into the Ganifa Park, if anything happens, they cannot get out on time, and there could be a stampede. So they had all that back and forth with the police officers. So you saw the ACP, Paul Okafor, addressing them and asking them to leave the road, And so at some point they went into the park, but some protesters decided not to go into the park because they were scared. They had cited some security issues and all of that stuff. And then later on, when the commissioner of police, it came like an angel, just to douse the tension, between the protesters and the security officers that were on the field at the time. And so when the commissioner came in, it was more like, we don't want to stay in Ganifa Park. We want to be allowed to protest on the streets. And so there was some sort of consensus between the protesters and the security officers, which is you can only use the service lane. And so for the protesters, it was some sort of victory, although it's small, but then they were very happy that the commissioner of police could listen to them. And so for the interaction between the police and the protesters, it was pretty civil. Yeah. There was no tear gas as we've seen in other protests. And as we even saw yesterday, I think someone was injured yesterday. It was an isolated issue. And this is something that the protesters have said, that they will ensure that this protest is peaceful, devoid of any kind of disturbance from the so-called hoodlums, that may want to infiltrate. And that's what the police actually did today by ensuring that these hoodlums do not infiltrate the protest.
Mr. Governor also had some commendation for the conduct of protesters yesterday. Some have said that Lagosians have learned from what happened during the NSAS protest, and everyone is careful everyone is an advocate of, you know, whatever you're doing on the streets,
Let it be peaceful.
let it be peaceful.
Let it be peaceful.
And one of the lawyers, senior advocates of Nigeria, Ebon Adegboruwa, is also asking that they should leave the streets now and engage in meaningful dialogue. Do you see that body language? Do you think that the protesters and indeed the Lagos state government, for instance, are ready to sit across the table to talk?
I think so. I think so. Because if you don't have a dialogue, why are the deadlock? So it's important that the protesters, of course, you know, there was some sort of dialogue we saw today between the protesters and the security officers. We saw that same dialogue between the protesters, among the protesters themselves, because you had the civil society organizations who are like the soli guys, right? And we also saw them, you know, talking to other Nigerians who had joined the protest, you know, asking them questions about, okay, should we extend the protest time? Should we come tomorrow by 7 a.m.? Should we come back on Monday? So there was all the dialogue. So if you don't have dialogue, you can't have anything done in the country. We cannot afford to be at a stalemate in the country.
Absolutely.
And so that's why I see that they want a dialogue, particularly one of the protesters that said that they're expecting the president to address them anytime soon. So if they already have that expectation, you know, so we're also expecting that the president will say, and the president, of course, has come up to say certain things, of course, through his ministers, through various agencies, and come up with certain economic policies. Now, it's just having that understanding with the people to say, okay, let's give this economic policies some time to actualize. And so that's where we're at this time.
Interesting development. Senior Correspondent Ayeku, thank you for the update there.
Of course.
All right, we're going to turn to the